Hello, I'm Christopher Walker. Today we're going to be looking at the reading part of the Reading and Use of English paper in the Cambridge English Advanced exam. To do the exercises in this presentation, you'll need to follow the links at the bottom of the page to download the exam specification or the Teacher's Handbook PDF. So let's have a look at the paper itself. Well, since 2015, the reading paper has been combined with the use of English paper. This makes a lot of sense, as I've discussed in another video about the use of English, in that these two skills are really very closely connected. The total time you have for the paper is an hour and a half, and for the reading there are 4 parts and a total of 26 questions. So let's have a look at the different parts. We'll start with part 5, which is the multiple choice. In this part you have a long text and several questions about it, each one of them offering multiple choice answers. I wouldn't bother reading the whole text first. A lot of people do this, and it's good to have a general understanding of the text, but there isn't really time in this new exam. There's simply too much to do. Since the questions follow the text in order, I think it's best if people just read the first question, find the answer to it, or at least find where the answer is, and usually you can tell this much, and then move on to the next question. The answer for the next question will not be in quite the same area as the first. It certainly won't be before the first. As always, I recommend people look for specific information in the text. Cambridge are very keen on what I call distractors, which is where they will give something, they will say some information that's very closely related to the question, but that isn't actually an answer to the question. So you need to look very carefully for the information itself. And one thing that many students don't do, but I really recommend, is that you underline the information you find as you're going through and make little notes. And you might not finish the task the first time through, hopefully you will, but you might not. So it's always useful, if you come back later, to know where you were when you were working through. Also, the very act of underlining information often helps you to see whether or not you have the right kind of answer. Okay, so we're going to have a look at part of this task. As I mentioned before, the task is in the PDF and the link is in the description to this video. We're just going to be looking at questions 31 to 33 this time. So let's have a look at the answers. And for number 31 we want C, and this is the idea there is no transcultural truth. This links into the question. For 32 we want A, and because we read the first concerns documentation and preservation, and it goes on from there, and this connects very well to the question. And then in 33 we want C. In short, one undertakes the internal structural analysis with which any study should begin, and this connects to the answer. Okay, so have a look. If you're not sure, compare these answers and the part from the text with the question and see if you can find the connection between the two. Okay, in part 6 we're looking at what we call cross-text multiple matching. Now this is a new task that Cambridge have introduced into the new Reading and Use of English paper. In the past they had a question in the use of English paper where you were given 3 sentences with a missing word and you had to find the word that fit all 3 sentences. This has now been replaced by something that's far more relevant to those of you who are studying the CAE because you want to go to university. This is a very academic reading task. So what do you have to do in this particular task? Well, to take the example in the PDF linked in the description, you have 4 reviews of a book, The Architecture of Happiness by Alain de Botton. Then you have 4 questions where you have to match the opinions of different reviewers of this book. So as I mentioned, this is a new task type. It's completely new from the 2015 exam. It's very difficult, but it can be done. You just need the right approach. So we're going to have a look at one possible approach. Start by taking a question that only mentions 2 texts. For example, in 38, you need to find a text that matches something in Review B. So the question for 38 is, which reviewer shares Reviewer B's opinion of the significance of de Botton's book? So let's take that one as an example. So read Review B and highlight the part that corresponds to this idea of the significance of his book. Okay, pause now so you can do that. On the next slide I'll show you what we found. Okay, so in review B, we find this part. He appears to believe that architects are still masters of their art, when increasingly they are cogs in a global machine for building in which beauty, and how de Botton feels about it, is increasingly beside the point. It's that part at the end, beside the point, that's really crucial. And this whole sentence suggests that the book, whilst entertaining, might be quite insignificant. So now have a look at the other three reviews, and you're just going to look for the parts of the text that will actually talk about the significance of de Botton's book. So again, pause and have a look, and then we'll check in a second. Okay, so here from review A, we find this sentence. You can check to see the whole of the sentence. That's a positive evaluation of the book's significance. So here the reviewer doesn't share reviewer B's opinion. From C, we get nothing really. There's nothing in C that's actually concerned with the significance of the book. So that leaves D. We know the answer now by a process of elimination, but we can just check. And then in D, we have this little expression, his jolly trip through the world of architecture. It's this little piece of vocabulary that suggests that the book is not very significant. So that gives us our answer. D agrees with B. So that's the answer for 38. So now that you've read all four of the text, you can either apply the same approach where you isolate, or you can take one of the questions that compares all four at once. Now I think the ones where you have to look at, for example 37 here, which reviewer has a different opinion from the others on the confidence with which de Botton discusses architecture, it's quite a difficult question if you approach it first, because you've got to hold a lot of information in your head all at once, whereas the one we've looked at, you can isolate and treat it from there. So don't be fooled though into thinking that because there are four options and four texts, or four questions rather, that all four of the texts are going to be used as answers. You can't think if, for example, you've got A, B, C, that the last one will be D. Not necessarily. So you'll need to do each one carefully and follow the same approach. Okay, so now it's your turn. Take a look at the other three questions and we'll quickly go through the answers in a moment. So pause the video here, try the text, have a look, follow the same approach, and remember to highlight the text that you find, the sentences that give the answer. So we'll quickly go through this. Then you can pause the video at any stage, or you can have a look at the PowerPoint slides that I've attached in the description below. So for 37 we want B. So here is some information. So here we say that de Botton needed help and support, so he wasn't very confident. Reviewer A suggests that he is competent, C likewise, and D doesn't really talk about it, so B is the answer. For 39, C. And here we've got this expression here. You can check in the text to see the full expression. So A talks about this, B talks about functional aspects, and D makes no explicit mention of how architects see things. So C is unique in looking at the more abstract terms of architecture. Then for 40 we want B. So B says this. You can check in the text to see the full sentence. This compares well with C. So that's a similar view. And then there we go. Okay, so some pointers then. So you need really, this part of the task will take a while to do. But it's worth it. There are 4 questions but 8 points available. Parts 5, 6 and 7 of the reading paper all carry 2 points each. So it's important that you do things very carefully. And it's really important to highlight the information you find, because there's a lot here to look at. There's too much to remember as you go from one to another. So highlight it, make little notes in the margins, help guide yourself. And also, like with any reading activity, look for words like while, although and however, because these mark contradiction in a text. If you want to show how two people have different opinions, these sort of markers are very handy. And then if you're really not sure of an answer, it's not worth hunting through the other text unless you've got a lot of time to go through it. Okay, part 7 is a more familiar task. This is the gapped text. In this task you have an extended piece of writing and 6 of the paragraphs have been removed. It's your job to figure out which paragraphs from those given fit into each position. Now, there's always a good reason for the paragraph to go in a given space, and sometimes there can even be 3 reasons for it. Something before the space and after the space can give you a clue, and also something in the space. So there's a lot to look for. So when you're looking at this part, think about names and pronouns. If before the space somebody's name is mentioned, then in the space you see the word he or perhaps she, there's a link there. Look for the development of the story itself. Think about answers to questions. If something happens in the gap, you don't know why, ask a question about it and see if you can make an answer from the text around the gap. If you can do that, then logically it suggests that there's a connection there. And as always, make notes. So we'll have a look at questions 41, 42 and 43. Pause now so you can try that. Okay, so 41 we want G. Why? Well, both it and the beast are back references. And after the gap we talk about physical differences, and the context here is really given in the gap itself. For 42 we want D. They in the gap refers to the animals that we're talking about, and it's clear that we're still looking at the topic of habitat, where the animals are living. So the topic itself continues after the gap, so there's also a development of the story. And then finally, for 43, we want A, and this answers the question, why did things improve? And the topic of extinction and survival continues, so we have story development as well. And then part 8, we have the multiple matching exercise. So in this task, you will be given 5 different short texts on a topic, and then you have a long list of statements. You have to match the statements to the people who made them. So it's a big task, and again, a lot of it comes down to the approach, because the whole paper is only an hour and a half. It's really important to have a good, strong exam technique. Now, this might not be the best technique, you might have a different way, but this works for me, and it's worked for my students. So I suggest that you start by reading text A, whichever one that is. And you could choose a different one if you want, it doesn't matter, but you choose one text to read, and you read it first before you read any of the statements. So when you finish reading text A, go through all of the questions, all the statements, marking those that you think are connected to text A. Now, they won't be in the same order as the text. They could be of any part. So you might have something about the end of the text first, and then the middle, and then the beginning. It doesn't matter. But go through all of the questions and mark those that belong to A. Then go to text B and do the same. Read text B, and then go back through the list of questions. But also do have a look at the questions you've already marked as belonging to text A, because you might have made a mistake. Then repeat that. In theory, let's say you have text A, B, C, D and E. If you simply don't have time, do the first 4. And then if you've got everything right, whatever's left will belong to the final text, and you can simply mark those answers. So if you're down to the last few minutes and you're really in a panic, just do that. Do the first 4 texts and leave the last one, or whichever one you haven't done. The answers then should go there. Okay, so we're going to look at text A, B and C. So you can pause the video here if you like. So which ones do we get for A? Well, we get number 50, and here's the link in the text. 54, and here's our evidence. For text B, we want 52, and here's the connection, and 55. So read back in the original text, and you can see how we got those answers. And then for text C, 49, we want this from the text, and 53, we have this. Okay, so before we finish, a couple of further ideas to help you succeed in this exam. So it's really important that you look for evidence before you go for which you think is the right answer. I mean, you can trust your instincts if you're confident or if you don't have the time, but it really is very useful to find something in the text that specifically answers the question. And always look for synonyms and other ways of expressing ideas. Let's say it says stay optimistic in the question. You have the words don't be dispirited in the text. There's obviously a connection there. And if you're good with synonyms, you'll be able to see that connection. And I've made this point several times in this video, but it really is very useful to underline your work. If you come back to it later, you'll be able to see where you were working through. But also, it's a way of making yourself think more deeply about why you're underlining something. Ask yourself, is it worth underlining this? Am I right? If you're not sure, it suggests that you've not quite got the answer yet. And manage your time. It's a long test, and your time is short. Good luck.